Farmer Jacob is losing everything: his land, his family, his hope, ashes under his feet. From the dust of the road, Donald Trump emerges with an offer that can't be refused. Become the face of my program or die in debt, a choice between honor and survival. The media laughs, politicians sabotage, while drainage systems stir beneath the field. A mudslide, engineered by enemies, washes everything away, except Jacob's farm. Scandal: Trump bought his land a year ago. Betrayal, or part of the plan? Hurricane Laura wipes out the state from the map, but the farm stands, an impenetrable fortress. Jacob learns the truth. Trump sacrifices himself to save the Stone family legacy. 1 year later, golden fields, a school for children, and a helicopter with a lone figure on the horizon. Why don't stars fall? Because someone holds up the sky. Stay tuned to find out how one farmer's stubbornness changed the game. And don't forget to subscribe. The toughest showdown is just beginning. Jacob Stone stood at the edge of the field as if on the brink of the world. His boots, cracked by time and anger, sank into the dust that had once been black soil, rich, full of life. Now the earth resembled the skin of a corpse, gray, pulled into wrinkles and cracks, whispering curses under the breath of the wind. The stalks, once golden as ingots in God's hands, hunched in a bow before the inevitable. They clung to their stems with bony fingers like children unwilling to let their mother go to the grave. That's how we all are, Jacob thought, clutching the letter from the bank in his pocket. The ink had smeared on the paper from sweat, turning the figures of his debt into an abstraction, maybe 1 million, maybe 10. The sky above, covered in a rust-colored smog, offered no answer. It had been silent for 18 months since his father had passed away. He'd left quietly, lay down after praying for rain, and never woke up. His fault, the neighbor said. He should have sold the land while there was still time. But the Stones never sold, never. The wind brought the smell of gasoline, sharp like a slap. Jacob turned. A limousine was creeping down the road, winding between dead farms, a black Beetle with headlights for eyes. The car stopped at a crooked fence, and a man in a suit, gleaming like foil on a Christmas turkey, stumbled out. Jacob recognized him immediately: tousled hair, a face carved like redwood, a hand gesture as though catching an invisible ball. "Mr. Stone," Trump's voice cut the silence like a circular saw. "Your fields." He paused, scanning the scorched plain. "Remind me of my first casino, before the renovation." Jacob didn't laugh. He noticed a bead of sweat roll down Trump's cheek, leaving a line in the layer of foundation. Strange, it seemed like people like him didn't sweat. They radiated money. "Did you come to buy?" the farmer asked, shifting from foot to foot. His heels burned, as though the earth was trying to pull him in. "The bank already has buyers. Some golf club." Trump snorted. His finger, adorned with a ring featuring initials, pointed to the horizon. "Do you see that cell tower? That's mine. And do you know what's under it?" He approached, and Jacob caught a smell, a mix of success cologne and something sour, like spoiled milk. "There used to be a farm there, just like yours. Ate it up in a year." He clicked his teeth, like catching a fly. "But you're stubborn. Like your oaks over there." Trump nodded toward the 3-century-old trees near the house, the last witnesses of an era when the land provided. Jacob clenched his fists. The oaks weren't even touched by the bank's lumberjacks. The legend said that spirits of the first Stones lived in their trunks. His father had said, "When the roots sing, we will leave." The roots were silent, but Jacob heard their groan at night. The choice is simple. Trump pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. Not a letter, a document with a golden seal. "Sign, and tomorrow your fields will flood with rain." Of money, literally. He smirked at his own joke, but suddenly fell silent. His gaze dropped to the barn wall where photos hung. His grandfather with a horse, his great-grandmother with a sickle, his father with a medal for the 1976 harvest. Trump's face twitched, as though someone had pulled an invisible string at the corner of his mouth. Or, he slowly ripped the document in half. "You can become the rain." Jacob froze. The wind picked up bits of paper, covered in zeros, and carried them toward the oaks. Somewhere in the distance, thunder cracked, dry, like a shot from an empty rifle. "There's a program." Trump spoke more quietly now, as though fearing the earth might overhear. "Not for the press. You'll teach people like me." He spun his finger, imitating a helicopter, how not to turn the country into a concrete desert. "And he faltered. "The first time that evening, I'll teach you how to fight." Suddenly, Trump yanked his tie, unbuttoned his collar. A pendant flashed on his neck, a tiny golden ear of corn. Jacob blinked. Maybe a mirage? But Trump was already turning back to the car. "Tomorrow at 7. No tardiness. You know, I hate waiting longer than for my personal jet." When the limousine disappeared in a cloud of dust, Jacob dropped to his knees. His palm pressed into the earth, cold despite the heat. And then he felt it, a barely noticeable vibration, as though somewhere deep a heart was beating. Or perhaps it was the roots of the oaks trembling, intertwining under the field, spelling the word yes. Dawn found Jacob in the barn, scraping dried blood off the wheels of the old tractor with a rusty shovel. His father had died at that wheel. His heart stopped exactly at noon, as if the earth itself had turned him off like a burnt-out light bulb. "You should have listened to your ancestors," the walls whispered. "They sang for you to run." But Jacob had stayed. Now, with a business card bearing the gilded logo of Trump Agri Revival in his pocket, it seemed that even the shadows on the walls were laughing at him. The limousine arrived exactly at 7, not black, but toxic gold, as if Trump had decided to dress in the color of the problem. Two people stepped out of the car, the billionaire himself in cowboy boots, alligator skin, undoubtedly, and a woman with a face resembling frozen yogurt, smooth, cold, and unnaturally white. "My advisor on." "Gah, cows." Trump slapped Jacob on the back so hard that he almost dropped the shovel. "Miss Blake knows everything about agriculture. Well, after Google." The woman extended her hand. Her palm was dry, like a herbarium. "We've prepared a presentation." Her voice was synthetic, as if from a GPS speaker. "You have meetings with the governor, speeches at—" "Shut up, Blake," Trump suddenly barked. "Are you in the city or something? Here we breathe first, then speak." He turned toward Jacob's house, where ghosts were already crowding on the porch. Grandma Ellie with a cigarette in the corner of her mouth, Grandpa Thomas with a milking bucket. Not real, of course, just shadows from the oak branches that Trump mistook for people. But Jacob saw them more clearly than the living. "Do you sleep here?" Trump jabbed a finger at the decaying steps. "My wardrobe is bigger than this house." He pulled out his phone and began dictating. "Urgent, 3 trailers with food, designer. What do they call those? Hipsters for the village?" "No need," Jacob cut him off. "Your advisor is right. Let's have the presentation." Trump froze. His eyes, usually darting around like hamsters in a wheel, suddenly grew serious, almost human. "You think I'm joking?" He waved his hand and Blake disappeared into the car, as if she were a genie in a lamp. "Let's take a walk." No witnesses. They walked along the dried-up river where Jacob had caught crayfish as a child. Trump remained silent for the first 10 minutes, possibly a record for his biography. Only when they reached the Stone family cemetery, 5 generations beneath stones made of local granite, did he speak. "My father built houses for the poor." He said, "Donald, real success is when your name survives the concrete." He kicked a rusty beer can. I hated him for that. I wanted towers that reached the sky. But then, he suddenly stopped at the grave of Jacob's mother. Then I understood. Towers fall, but what you bury in the ground. His hand trembled, pointing at the field. It grows, even after 100 years. Jacob felt something warm flutter beneath his ankle. A worm? A root? When he bent down, Trump grabbed his shoulder. "Don't look down. Look at the horizon. That's where the enemy is." In the distance, factory chimneys smoked, bought by the Chinese last year. That's where the drought lizard came from, as the locals called it. But Jacob wasn't looking at the smoke. He saw his own farm reflected in Trump's pupil, distorted like in a crooked mirror, but alive, with green fields and a new house instead of ruins. "Why me?" Jacob exhaled. "You could have hired anyone. An actor, a politician, even that, Blake." Trump pulled out a cigar. He didn't light it, just twirled it between his fingers like it was a magic wand. When I was 7, my father gave me a farm, a real one with cows and stink. He grimaced, but there was a strange tenderness in his voice. I hated every blade of grass, sold it in a month. And then, he turned so the sun illuminated the wrinkles around his eyes. Then I found out there were rare apple trees there, the last ones in the state. Now it's a parking lot. Jacob felt the ground beneath him tremble. Or was it just him? Trump suddenly grabbed his hand, pressing it to his chest. Beneath the expensive suit, his heart beat, fast, uneven, like a trapped animal. "You're my apple tree, Stone." For the first time, there was no grandiosity in his voice. "I won't let them cut you down." But he tightened his grip on Jacob's hand so that the bones cracked. "You'll become my axe. Understand? We'll chop their laws, their credits, their damn pipes." Jacob jerked his hand free. His fingers dug into the trunk of the nearest oak, searching for support. The bark flaked beneath his skin, smelling of time and tears. Somewhere above, a crow cawed, the same one that had appeared before his father's death. "And what if I refuse?" he asked, staring at the cracked well where water had disappeared 2 years ago. Trump pulled out his phone. On the screen was a satellite image of the farm, bright red spots of chemicals around it, blue lines of underground water draining to the factory. He tapped the center of the image. "Here, beneath us, is the aquifer, the last one. In a month, the Chinese will reach it." His nail, covered in clear polish, scratched the screen. But if tomorrow an article about Farmer Hero versus Beijing Dragon, he snapped his fingers, money will flow here, like blood to the heart. Jacob closed his eyes. His father's voice echoed in his ears. "They will come with gold and lies. Drive them away." But when he opened his eyes, he saw something strange. Trump was kneeling, drawing something on the dusty ground. Letters? Numbers? No, an irrigation system diagram, an exact copy of the one Jacob had drawn in his notebook after his father died. "Where did you?" he gasped, as if he'd just run a marathon. "I read the land," Trump whispered. "I've always read it. It's just—" He ran a hand over his suit, as if brushing off invisible dirt. "It's not for sale. People want a show." "Well," he jumped up, once again becoming the showman, "let's give them a show. You're the face, I'm the wallet, and these," he kicked the ground, raising a cloud of dust, "will be our makeup." Jacob didn't answer. He walked back to the house, feeling Trump's words prickling into his back like thorns. In the kitchen, smelling of mold and cumin, a surprise awaited him. On the table sat a cast-iron pot with stewed beans, Grandma Ellie's recipe. Next to it was a note with the signature T, the first rule of the fight, don't fight on an empty stomach. The second, eat what the land gives, learn it by breakfast. Outside, the engine of the golden limousine howled. Jacob took a spoon. He froze. Then he abruptly went outside and dumped the food beneath the old oak. The earth greedily sucked in the offering. "Here," he whispered, "you decide." That night he was woken by a crash. Jacob ran out onto the porch, expecting bulldozers from the bank. But it wasn't the sound of bulldozers. It was the sky rumbling. The first raindrops hit the roof like pellets in a drum. Amidst the thunder, he caught another sound, Trump's laughter, recorded on voicemail. "See? They're already scared of us." When morning painted the sky the color of a bruise, the first sprout had pushed up under the oak. Small, stubborn, a baby's fist. The rain poured for 3 days. By the 4th morning, Jacob no longer understood where the water ended and the tears began. The fields, which only yesterday resembled the shell of a dead turtle, now breathed with steam. And dragonflies, blue like shards of the sky, floated in the puddles by the barn, lost during the drought. Trump called it a PR miracle. Jacob silently dug trenches, diverting the streams from the cellars where the last bags of seeds were stored. Each night, he dreamed that the rain was his father's tears, waking up with a salty taste on his lips. On the 5th day, the trucks arrived. First, white vans with television company logos. Then trucks from which people in plaid shirts and with iPads instead of notebooks spilled out. rural experts, as Trump introduced them, waving his arms in the rain like the conductor of an apocalypse. Jacob stood aside, gripping a rake in his hand, whether as a tool or a weapon. His farm had turned into a film. In the field, where they had once buried stillborn calves, they now set up chairs for a press conference. People! Trump climbed onto a tractor, not noticing how the rusty fuel cap dug into his palm. Today, we save America. Not with sanctions, not with Instagram boobs, but with this. He tossed a handful of dirt into the crowd. A reporter from CNN dressed in a white suit screamed, examining the dirt stain on her chest as if it were a bullet wound. But enough talking. Trump jumped down, grabbed Jacob by the wrist. Here is your new Secretary of Agriculture. No better, General. Because this is war, and his voice cracked, and they could hear the rain hitting the plastic camera covers. He knows how to bury his own. The crowd applauded. Jacob felt something crawling on his cheek, perhaps the rain, perhaps goosebumps. In the past few days, he had learned a new rule. Trump's metaphors cling to the skin like burrs. They can only be torn out with flesh. Mr. Stone. A microphone was thrust at his chin. Is it true that you only agreed to the deal after Mr. Trump threatened to buy your ancestors from their graveyard? Jacob opened his mouth, but an explosion drowned him out. From the sky, tearing through the clouds, swooped a helicopter with the words Trump Rescue on it. Bags poured from the hatch, fertilizers, GMO seeds, bundles of dollars in transparent wrappers. One bag burst open, and the banknotes were mixed with mud, like bait for greed. See? Trump held up a bill, dripping brown sludge. Money is manure. It stinks, but everything grows. Jacob turned away. His gaze fell on the oaks, where between the branches a shadow flickered, tall, hunched, with a cigarette in its mouth. Grandma Ellie? Or just missed? He moved toward the trees, but suddenly the ground beneath his feet trembled. There was a crack, like someone breaking the planet's spine. Landslide! Someone shouted. From the hill where the factory stood, a brown avalanche came rushing down, water mixed with chemicals spilling from a broken dam. Trump was shouting into his phone. Journalists ran to their cars, while Jacob knelt, clutching the earth. So this is your miracle, he thought, watching the stream wash away the saplings they had planted that morning. But then a thunderclap, sharp like a gunshot. The landslide split, bypassing the farm as though an invisible wall protected it. Everyone fell silent. Trump was the first to speak, pointing at the sky. See, my drainage systems work even at a distance. Technology, people! But Jacob knew the truth. The drainage pipes lay in boxes by the barn. He picked up a handful of dirt. It pulsed like it was alive. And in the distance at the edge of the field stood a figure in a cloak. Not tall, hunched with a shovel on its shoulder. Then it disappeared. By night, the farm was empty. Jacob sat on the porch, rubbing a golden ear of corn between his fingers, the very one that had fallen from Trump's neck during the crowd crush. Inside the ear, if you looked closely, there was an engraving. Frederick Trump, 1884. Grandfather? Great-grandfather? Suddenly, there was a creak. From the darkness emerged Trump without his jacket, his hair tousled. In his hands, he carried 2 glasses and a bottle of old Overholt whiskey. My father drank this when he signed the first contracts. He flopped onto the step, not offering Jacob to join him. He said it tasted like the sweat of construction workers. Idiot. He took a sip, grimaced. But he was right about one thing. Real power isn't in money. It's in. He searched for the word, swirling the glass. Roots, even if they stink of whiskey. Jacob turned the ear of corn. In the moonlight, the engraving gleamed like a scar. Was your grandfather a farmer? A shoemaker? Trump chuckled hoarsely. He made boots for gold prospectors, and they paid him in sand. He leaned in suddenly, serious. Do you know what I did when I found out about your farm? I bought all the factory shares. This morning, their prices plummeted. He snapped his fingers. Tomorrow, the Chinese will run off like cockroaches. Jacob jumped up. A lump formed in his throat, angry, sharp. And the landslide? He shouted. To look like a hero. Trump slowly rose, his shadow, elongated by the moon, covered Jacob like a wing. Heroes are needed by the crowd. I need. He reached for the oaks where the wind hummed in the leaves, for these trees to outlive me. Got it? His voice quivered. When I die, they'll call me a clown, you a saint, and that. He gestured and threw the glass into the darkness. That's justice. He left without looking back. Jacob remained sitting, listening to the earth beneath him hum a lullaby. In the morning, he found a box by the oaks. Inside were old photographs, a boy in shorts planting an apple tree. On the back, the inscription, Donald, 7 years old, the last sapling. When the bulldozers arrived to clear the remains of the landslide, Jacob's first time in a month, in his hands, he held a new plan, not for irrigation, but for a school, a place where children would learn to hear the earth. And at the edge of the field, where the stream had passed, a corn seedling was already green. The stem was crooked, the leaves spotted, but it had broken through the asphalt road, like a finger pointing at the sky. The Rural Revival program became a national meme faster than the first harvest. Someone launched the hashtag #CornClown, which stuck to Trump and Jacob like gum on a shoe. Against the backdrop of memes with Trump in a cowboy hat, dancing on a hay bale, real victories were disappearing. 3 restored farms, a children's agricultural school, a law banning chemicals. But the land, as Jacob noticed, doesn't read tweets. It simply gave a harvest, modest, bitter, but alive, until August came. Jacob found out about the collapse from the news. Sitting in the trailer with air conditioning, a gift from Trump so your brain doesn't fry, he watched as a Republican senator with a weasel face pointed a finger at the camera. Billions gone. Where are the reports? Where's the equipment? Photos flashed on the screen, the luxurious ranch of Trump's son in Texas offshore accounts, piles of rusty pipes instead of the promised irrigation systems. The host sarcastically added, "Seems like someone planted dollars and harvested a scandal." Suddenly, the trailer shook, not from an earthquake but from Trump's fist pounding on the door. He barged in, ripping off his tie, and threw a folder on the table. Photos spilled out. Children from the agri school shooting their first harvest of radishes, an old farmer hugging a sack of seeds. Letters with the inscription, "Thank you," instead of stamps. "These are your reports," he hissed. "They won't get printed, because the truth is shit without PR. And he grabbed a can of coffee and drank it in one gulp. "We become shit." Jacob was silent. A lump was stuck in his throat, anger, shame, and fear. The window, letting in the smell of a storm. The air smelled of ozone and rotting dollars. "Did you steal?" Staring at the black sky. Trump smashed the can against the wall. Brown splashes landed on the photos of the children like blood. "I was saving," he yelled. "These idiots in the Senate cut the budgets. I had to maneuver." He sat down, suddenly hunched. "Do you think I don't know what hunger is? In the 90s, I ate burgers for debts, but they..." He nodded toward the invisible media. "Want meat. Our meat." Jacob stormed out, slamming the door. The rain lashed his face as he walked toward the oaks. Now their trunks were wrapped in barbed wire with a sign that read, "Private property." The bank had finally sent new owners. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Trump had called 18 times. On the 19th, Jacob threw the device into an old well. The response was a muffled splash. The water returned to bear witness to his downfall. That night, Hurricane Laura flattened the state like a paper cup. Jacob, strapped to the chair with a bottle of whiskey, Trump's second gift, watched as the wind tore his dreams from their roots. The roof of the agri school torn off, flooded fields, dead apple trees floating in muddy rivers. But when lightning illuminated his own farm, he rubbed his eyes. The house stood unharmed, as if enclosed in a glass dome. Even the oaks didn't flinch, although the neighbor's barn flew into the sky like a balloon. "Magic?" Jacob chuckled hoarsely. "Or your tricks, Donald." He ran out into the downpour, sliding through the mud that didn't flood but flowed around his land. At the property line, he stumbled upon a steel door in the ground, a hatch disguised as a mound. The lock had an engraving, TSR, 2024. Below, in a bunker with concrete walls, the pumps hummed. Jacob descended the stairs, hearing voices. Trump's voice. A recording playing on repeat. Drainage channels, 3 meters deeper, rebar. Not for the press, damn it. The flashlight beam revealed blueprints, underground tunnels, filters, steel shields. Everything marked with the seal, approved by J. Stone. But Jacob had never signed it. On the table was an envelope. Inside, a deed of sale for the farm from a year ago. Trump's signature. And a note, returns under the condition, Jacob Stone lasts longer than Hurricane Laura. Gravel crunched behind him. Jacob turned. Trump stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone, with a cut on his cheek. In his hand, a flashlight that trembled in sync with his breathing. Weather predictions are my weakness, he rasped. I knew they'd hit both the fields and you. Jacob hurled the deed at him. The paper slashed Trump's eyebrow. You bought my land. You hid it. Played the benefactor. Hid it, yes. Trump caught the second flying document. Because if you knew, you would have run, like everyone else. He grabbed Jacob by the shoulders, shaking him like a pear. You held out. On your own. Without my money. And now, he gestured at the bunker. It's yours. All these pumps, blueprints, they were built on your stubbornness. Jacob broke free. His fist hit Trump's jaw with a crunch, like oak branches under the force of the wind. Trump dropped to his knees, spat blood, and laughed. There he is, he rasped. The anger. You buried it like your father buried his debts. He rose, leaning on the pump. Now listen. In an hour, reporters will come. They'll see your farm is intact while the rest is hell. You'll be a saint, and I. He wiped his mouth. I'll be the scapegoat. That's how it should be. Trump's phone rang. The tune was YMCA. He looked at the screen and gritted his teeth. My lawyers, damn them. He threw the device at Jacob's feet. Choose fame or truth. If you want, give them this. Let them burn me. Jacob tapped on the screen. He dialed the number he knew by heart. Hello, the voice of the bank agent. Mr. Stone, we're ready to discuss. No, Jacob interrupted. You'll get your land when I die, but for now. He looked at Trump, who was lighting a cigar on the pump's control lamp. For now, there will be a school here, a real one, without your plaques. He left the bunker. The hurricane had subsided. In the east, the dawn was ablaze, turning the puddle by the oaks into the color of golden wheat. There, in the murky water, floated a dead crow, the very one that had cried before his father's death. Jacob picked it up and wrapped it in his scarf. Goodbye, he whispered. We're free. When the journalists arrived, they found Jacob planting potatoes. When asked, where's Mr. Trump, he pointed with the shovel to the sky. There, dissolving into the clouds, a helicopter with a golden T on its tail was flying away. And in the evening, after the cameras had left, Jacob found a box by the oaks. Inside was a child's drawing, a boy in a tower of money watering a flower. On the back, in Trump's handwriting, they're still afraid of us. A year later, Jacob's wheat had grown to the clouds. The children from the agricultural school called it the cosmic forest. The stalks, as thick as telegraph poles, rang in the wind like harp strings. The farm had turned into a sanctuary. Ecologists, poets, even senators who once vilified Trump in the press came to visit. But Jacob avoided the cameras. He worked the soil, where beneath a layer of compost lay an old phone, the last threads of the past, buried like a seed. The harvest festival began with rain. Not the stingy autumn drizzle, but a downpour that drummed on the barn roofs as if the sky were dancing a victorious twist. Jacob stood under a canopy, watching the children dance in a circle around the oaks. Their faces, smeared with dirt, glowed with pride. Each held a pumpkin grown with their own hands. Suddenly, the sound of an engine rumbled in the distance. A helicopter flew over the field, not golden, but battered, with a faded T on its side. Late, as always, Jacob smirked, but his heart clenched as if it had caught a hook. Trump stepped out of the car, not in a suit, but in work overalls and a cap that read, Made in the Province. He was carrying a bag from which grain spilled. People froze. Some laughed, others began filming on their phones. But when Trump approached the oaks and spilled the grain at their roots, the silence became thick as tar. Captain Obvious, Jacob muttered, but he was already walking toward him. Trump turned around. His face, etched with wrinkles deeper than cracks in the dry season, twitched into something resembling a smile. "They say your wheat can be seen from space," he rasped. "The rovers are probably jealous." They watched silently as the children flew a kite shaped like a stalk of wheat. The kite caught the wind and soared upward, carrying shouts of joy. Trump took out a cigar, but instead of lighting it, he broke it in half. He handed one part to Jacob. "As a souvenir, 10-year-age tobacco, like us." Jacob took the half. Inside, instead of tobacco, were seeds, tiny with red veins. "A new variety," Trump squinted. "Grows even on concrete, named Stubborn, in your honor." They sat on the porch until late at night. Trump talked about his ranch in Montana, where he had fled after the scandal, about a herd of bison that trampled his fields, but he didn't stop them. "They remind me of myself, stubborn, useless, beautiful." Jacob listened, nodding. For the first time in a year, he didn't feel anger, just exhaustion, sweet like the juice of an overripe pear. When the moon rose over the field, Trump stood up. His shadow, long and fragile, fell on the ground like the last bridge between eras. "Do you know why the stars don't fall?" he asked, looking up. "Because someone holds up the sky." He pointed a finger at Jacob's chest. "Now it's your turn." As a farewell, he threw Jacob an envelope. Inside, from a helicopter camera, Jacob's farm, glowing with lights at night, like an oasis in the black desert. On the back, the inscription, "Thank you for not becoming me." In the morning, as Jacob saw off the last of the guests, he found a contract in the barn. The same one, with Trump's signature and the stamp "Paid, land debt." But now, next to the stamp, someone had written in ink, "Debt to the sky grow further." He walked into the field. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a rainbow that arced straight into the roof of the agricultural school. The children were already running between the beds, shouting the names of constellations that Jacob had taught them. "Here, the Big Dipper, and there, Trump's wheat," he laughed. The laughter was carried by the wind and spread across the valley, where on the old factory, leaning with age, mother and stepmother flowers had broken through the asphalt. His new phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from an unknown number, a photo of a bison stomping on a sign that said "Private Property." The caption, "Stubborn 1, 0 concrete." Jacob didn't reply. Instead, he plucked a stalk, threw it up. The grain scattered, caught by the wind, and flew toward the horizon to sow a new story.